Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Jared Penn. Jared is a marketing professional and writer with a dream of becoming an acclaimed author. Fueled by a lifelong love for storytelling, Jared has dedicated his writing towards his career as well as his personal life. Correlating lifelike themes and stories within one another, his creativity and inspiration have played important roles in sharing these stories, which have been the driving factors of becoming a writer. Jared is a local author who grew up and lived in Wayne, New Jersey for most of his life. He received a bachelor's degree in marketing from Ramapo College of New Jersey in 2015. During his free time, Jared enjoys playing music, reading, and watching films. He currently resides in Pompton Lakes, New Jersey. Welcome, Jared. Please tell us a little more about your book, Prisoner of Depression.
Thank you for having me. So Prisoner of Depression is a memoir, hence the subtitle, Memoir of an Unexpected Journey. It basically details a 5-month period of my life when I was incarcerated. It was for a crime that was accidentally committed, and the crime was committed through a suicidal attempt. So hence the incarceration was in a mental psychiatric prison system. And the book basically entails my journey through it. It's unexpected because it's something I didn't expect to happen. It's something I thought I would never happen to me. And one half of the book chronologically details the journey of going through those 5 months, from the start of it to the end of it, from upon my admittance through my release. And then the second half has various journal entries that I did, because majority of the book was written while I was away.
Okay, that was going to be my first question. Did you write the book while you were incarcerated? Because it reads like you were writing it each chapter as you lived it. If so, how much editing did you do to the original draft of the book?
So yes, majority of it, almost all of it, was written while I was away. And in terms of the editing process, it was a lot. It was a lot of material. All of the material wasn't used, so there was a good amount of editing and cutting in there. And for writing it, I did write it in a chronological order as I was living on this 5-month experience and journey. And for the editing, it took about 2 to 3 months afterwards, after I was released. So the editing process was very hard because some things were a little bit out of order. I had to chronologically make it make sense to the reader. I had to make it intriguing to the reader so that it was approachable, so that they knew what they were getting themselves into when they were reading the book. And like I said, the editing process was about 2 to 3 months. That was probably the hardest process of the entire journey of writing this book and getting it published.
Which stories did you decide to put in, and can you kind of elaborate, like, as to why certain things, certain key events, or certain key moments were more key to putting them in the book?
So I basically journaled when I was writing this, and journaling entails someone that's basically reporting almost everything. Not only was it um, a tool to help me cope with my mental illness and with my situation, my living situation and everything, because there is a lot of downtime. I did a lot of reading. The reading what helped me is what also helped me with my writing as well. So reading a lot of books does help. And in terms of the journaling, you're journaling almost everything you're doing. So majority of the actions, it would have probably tripled the length of the book if I hadn't edited anything out. And I wanted to just basically chronicleize the more important events that happened that had the most effect on me, that was going to affect my journey in terms of getting out. The whole theme of the book basically is resiliency. So there's events in there that are journalized and and detailed, where it's going to affect my outcome and my journey through it. So
Okay. Um, in the chapter titled hunger strike, you mentioned that you aren't able to get into the particulars of your case. Was it difficult to tell your story without describing the incident that led you to being sent to the psychiatric prison?
It was extremely difficult. I even had feedback from one or two readers saying, even though I had no idea what crime was committed, whether it was accidental or not, um, they felt like it was incomplete from the story. I personally felt like it wasn't really necessary to be added because the story is mainly about the journey going through it. It's not mainly about figuring out this case and trying to figure out my outcome of it. It's not really a court case file type of story. It's more of um, a mental lapse, basically a mental journey going through this. Not only how am I physically surviving, but how am I mentally surviving as well going through this because this is a an environment that I'm not completely familiar with. It's also a very dangerous environment too. So I did write in the book a lot of instances like that where it can state that it is dangerous and such. But in terms of releasing the details of my case, it was very difficult. I had to kind of sugarcoat it in saying, well, this was not an intended crime that was committed. This was accidental. Um, I would have expected by the end of the story, by the end of the book, that readers would get the sense that they knew that this was not all intentional because this was something that I didn't ask for. This was something where I needed to get out immediately. Um, how quick can I get out for something that I didn't intend? So,
Um, I, in the first part where you're detailing the what happened in the psychiatric facility, you mentioned that you were kind of taken under by three therapists, three psychiatrists that worked with you. And you said that you mentioned that it was very unusual for them to, you know, three of them to see you like kind of as a team. Um, was that just because it wasn't mentioned again? So was that like part of you think what helped you a lot to get through quicker and did they recommend that you journal as much as you did?
actually, the journaling was all my idea. It wasn't suggested at all. In a place like this, because it's more of a maximum security type of forensic center, also a mental prison, if you want to say it like that. A lot of the inmates that were also mentally ill, that were dealing with some kind of psychiatric problem, they either were not aware of getting the help or they didn't want to get the help. So that considering that I wanted to get out of there and I wanted to get the help or do anything I can to quicken my time to be released, I wanted to help, although it wasn't very helpful. Even if it was three people, which I did have, I was seeing different people. It was very inconsistent. Um, I was being treated as if I was another inmate that was kind of neglecting all of it because that's what they're used to. They're not used to someone that's willingly wanting to get help because they know that they are receiving such help and that it does help in the end some, where a lot of these other inmates are thinking, well, it's not going to help for me. I feel like it's not going to, I've never gone through this before, so I'm not going to even bother. I know what I did was wrong. I know what I did, so I'm not going to even bother, like I said. So I got a little bit of the extra attention for having more psychiatrists and therapists seeing me there. But it wasn't as helpful because it was basically the three of them not collaborating and I was getting three different views. Yeah. So
Okay.
well,
Okay.
it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. And that's why the stay was longer than anticipated. It was actually originally supposed to be a 60-day stay, and they automatically doesn't even matter if you can be the best patient or the worst patient, they always renew another 2 to 3 months anyway after review. So I think it's for insurance purposes or it's just for that's what I'm assuming, and that's what I've heard through the grapevine, through the system, saying that a lot of these places do prolong people's stay in terms of depending on your insurance, and that goes for hospitals and psychiatric inpatient places as well. They do that. It depends on insurance these days.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
crazy. Early in the book, you describe friendship as a rope, as a metaphor that I really kind of latched onto. That friendship should not be a tug of war, but a jump rope where problems between friends circulate in the middle. Can you explain why you chose the rope metaphor to describe friendships?
sure. I first originally thought of the whole tug of war reference, the symbolizing of obviously two forces fighting against you, pulling against each other. You have two entities. Basically, imagine that they are one end, one person is holding a rope, the other is obviously holding a rope, and you obviously need two people to hold that rope in order for this rope or this tug of war or jump rope to be active. The tug of war is basically a friendship that's pulling away from each other, that's fighting against each other, and sometimes even that rope can break if it's such with great force. That friendship can or relationship can be broken. I reference then the jump rope because it's a circular motion where a friendship or relationship is going to have its ups and downs, hence the jump rope motion. And it also allows for more people to be involved into your relationship or your friendship. So you're adding these people to, you're inviting them to jump rope with you, to jump along, to go along this rope motion with you, as opposed to adding them on where you can add them on to a tug of war because you're not going to just have maybe one person at the end. You can have a team of people. It could be a group of people fighting against you and then some on the other side as well. So I use that reference because um, I thought of the tug of war, but then I thought, the jump roping action. Um, there's always another side in terms of any kind of metaphor or reference or symbolism. You have to think of the positives and the negatives of it. So I thought of that, of this tug of war in a positive sense as well. And this metaphor really kind of made sense. I really, it clicked. And I actually had commented, I had people comment on that saying that that and some other metaphors were really nicely touched. It was very creative because I think in terms of symbolizing things mm, and metaphors, you can be creative in any way. Especially since you're going through the motions, you're almost kind of acting as if you're doing these actions. I almost felt like I was in a tug of war physically with people. That's how mentally it felt so forceful. So
Okay. Well, it was good. It caught my attention. As I said, I definitely was going to ask this question. So thank you for explaining. Towards the end of the memoir, you shared a key moment from your time at the county jail when your bunkmate committed suicide. How did that experience change you?
it changed me for life. It was something, it is something I will probably never forget. Um, I do suffer a little bit of post-traumatic stress from it, which is pretty typical. I think any normal person would. Um, it was very unexpected, especially in a place where you're in very confined quarters. You're living with about 25 to 35 people in a very small confined room with maybe some bunk beds. There was even a time where there weren't even enough bunk beds. I had to sleep on the floor underneath, dining tables and such. And luckily I had a bunk bed and I had a bunk mate eventually. And this happened while I think majority of the inmates were gone. I think they were at a church service and I stayed back and this person suddenly um committed what they did. It scared me. There's someone always on watch. The most disturbing part about the whole thing was how it was handled. Um, there's no compassion, there's no emphasizing with the inmates, even though this is a mental health quarters where they're going to need the extra attention and such. And that's why they have the extra supervision 24 hours to prevent such instances like this one. But unfortunately, that's not the case because apparently this person found a way to do it. It wasn't handled properly. No one even came to get them for at least a half hour. So they were just, I was just sitting there with the person, lying there. Yeah, I'm not going to go into much detail, but it was disturbing because of just how it was handled. Um, it was very inhumane, very inhumane. Um, this person's a human being, should be treated with a human being. Um, it was very difficult. It was very hard. Um, I had to share it because um, it's important to know what's going on out there in these systems and the flaws of it, and what people are going through, whether they're getting help or not. I believe this person probably wasn't getting the help or probably wasn't realizing that there are resources out there. So there's the real realization process of this as well. So it was very difficult. Yeah.
What, not just what happened, but what you described, as you just said about how many people in this small room, there's not even enough beds. Um, with somebody suffering from mental illness, this is not the perfect environment to have this many people all congregated in this small space, expected to live together. So already that was the description of those scenes in the county jail were just horrific, only because they're you just feel like it's so oppressive to be in this confined space. It's already prison. You're in a confined. You're going to be confined, but to have so many people, that is beyond the capacity. And of course, there are people who are going to have adverse effect. They're going to want to find ways to deal with it. That, as this person did, is it's very sad that's the end. Result for him. And yes, the way that it was handled by the staff was just horrible.
And I
Horrible.
also give my readers a choice. I don't know if you remember from reading, but even before this chapter, I do put a warning in the book,
Mhm.
because it can be triggering for people. And I give people the choice to skip it or not, because just because there are instances in this book where, or chapters where it's going to be a little difficult and a little hard to read, I do give these warnings and I give the invitation opportunity saying, you don't have to read this, you can skip it. It won't affect the storytelling of this whole book, but um, it's also important to think about the readers too, because we don't want to trigger someone in the wrong way. And for the person's protection as well, I don't reveal their names,
Mhm.
or people in the, I might have altered people's names in the book just for their protection and such, because for privacy reasons.
Yes. Um, so to move on to a less sad topic. Um, how did you choose the opening quotes for each of the chapters in the book?
Well, I got the idea of adding quotes to the beginning of each chapter. I wanted to make the book stand out in some way where, or the chapter stand out where it introduces you to the chapter. Um, I chose quotes because not all quotes have to be serious. They can be by, it doesn't have to be by an author. It can be by any
Mhm.
person today, that just has to relate to the chapter. I did a lot of research. I was looking up a lot of quotes. I was trying to find some good ones that would kind of send a message to the reader saying, okay, you're going to read this quote. So this is kind of giving you a hint to entail what's going to unfold in the chapters. So,
Okay. Was there a favorite one? Did you have any favorite one that you were really like, I have to put this in the book?
um, it was really hard. I was trying to find someone famous to kind of relate to every incident so that the reader can relate to these people in the quotes so they can say, oh, I know this person and I know this quote. What a nice quote. I didn't know they say that, but now I'm going to find out why the author puts this quote. I don't really have a favorite. I think they're all pretty great. I think they're great only because I think they really play into effect of again what's being told throughout that chapter.
Yes, they did. They absolutely did. Um, so are you working on anything new? Writing? Is anything like forthcoming or in the works?
At the moment, I'm not writing anything, but I have been brainstorming and thinking about doing a follow-up book for this. It's something uh kind of like another memoir, but dealing with the after facts
Mhm.
of being released, my reflections on how I felt when I had time pass over. Um, I also thought about writing the book in terms of um, dealing with mental illness, not also not in a prison-like system, which was
Mhm.
what the first book was basically about, but living it in an everyday, day-to-day scenario with this past lingering. So it's kind of just moving on to the next step and kind of like how I'm still dealing and coping with it because it's something that will never go away, but the coping of it can be manageable and can also be another story or a continuous journey on its own.
Okay. And for this book, do have you heard from any of the people who've read it? Or you did actually mention that some of them have gotten in touch. What kind of things do they say?
Almost all of the feedback from my readers have mentioned and I've gotten both in-person and online reviews through Amazon. Amazon reviews, most majority of the people, I mean, there's not a lot of reviews, there's only several. They did love the book. I've had people verbally tell me the book in person that they really relate to it and they love it. When I spent a time uh, in an inpatient facility in an outpatient facility months ago. I was also sharing the book whenever I'm in these places if I have to go for any reason, I also share my book and I'm sharing with these other patients who can relate. So they're really giving me a lot of feedback saying, I know exactly what you're talking about. These metaphors really help. I know what you mean. I feel the same way. And I have had a negative criticism once or twice with the book saying, and that's only because it didn't entail my reasoning for why I was sent away. And they thought that, well, maybe it should have been included. You kind of talk about how you feel like you don't belong there, even though you committed something. That is true, but I felt like I couldn't be there. So that's why I was always just in the fact saying that I'm the type of individual that wouldn't do this. And even though I did, it's hard to tell these people without telling your whole life story and your whole background, saying, I'm not this type of individual that would continue to do crimes and such, that doesn't have that background in history like other inmates that I was with like had a substantial history of crime and such, where this was one little instance. And um I still think whether it's little or it's not little, an instance is an instance. It still happened. I still accepted that fact. But I think some people were saying were kind of maybe not annoyed, but disintrigued about the fact that I kept stating that I didn't belong there and I didn't belong there. And you know what? I think it's pretty normal for someone to say that if they're in that kind of scenario, saying like, I don't belong here, I don't want to be here. If anything, I don't want to be here. That's the real fact. So
Okay, does make sense.
yeah.
um, um, no, I found myself like, well, what was, what happened? But then, um, yeah, if you put yourself in your shoes, you start to think, well, if I found myself in the same thing and it was something that I did that wasn't, and now listening to these folks tell me, like, kind of, I'm sure they're telling you what they did or what got them there or their life stories. And yeah, you don't belong there. Or you just, it happened. You did the 5 months, and now, as you're saying, you might want to write the next chapter of your life as to how you got through it and got to this stage of your life. So the what happened is just a piece. And if it's missing for some, then they're looking for a different story.
Correct. Yeah.
So how long have you been writing?
Well, I've been writing for about several years, and I include that back into the college days too, because I did a lot of writing for, even though it wasn't in terms of this topic, I did a lot of writing, and that's what really helped me in my training. I have been doing a lot of journaling and writing for the past few years, just personally, so that has been helping a lot. The uh the journaling is helpful because it gives me a lot of material to use to want to share with others, which is again the instance in this book.
Okay. And so you wrote it over the course, I assume, of the 5 months. But how long did it take you to write the book? Like from, the time that you were writing it to when you sat down to piece it together, choose what of your writing you were going to add. How long in total did it take?
The entire process from start to finish
Mhm.
um probably took close to 10 months. Half of it was when I was away, and then the other half was when I returned home and I was doing some more writing. And then there was that like 2 or 3 months of like the editing and the rearranging and trying to piece together which segments of the story and journey should I include into the book. And um, like I said, it was almost completely half and half, where half was the writing and the other half was the publishing and the editing and sorting and arrangement.
So you once you got out, you continued to write. You didn't like you didn't put it aside and then think about, oh, I should do something with this. It was continuous.
Yes. So I did write a little more, I added a little more. Rereading it, you're adding edits, you're adding stuff to it. You know, you're going through the motions, and as you're going through the motions, my brain is using this creativity in terms of getting more ideas and how can I elaborate it in terms of words and symbolisms and metaphors that I can explain it to the reader to make it make more sense. So
Okay. And so in terms of your writing, what would you say is something that you consider to be like a major influence in your writing?
definitely the whole creativity aspect of it. Um, I have always been a creative person my whole life. Whether I'm watching movies, I'm getting ideas, playing music, there's creativity, there's art there. So I'm always wanting to have this notion of creating, and especially in the sense of storytelling,
Mhm.
because I feel like as I've done it verbally as a public speaker and been elaborate about uh, telling my stories, I haven't done it as much on paper. So I wanted to journey out into more of the writing aspect of it. Um, and I felt like my public speaking and has really contributed to the writing. So that's a major influence right there, because I think if you don't speak well, if you don't have that vernacular, that articulation, you need to also have that articulation on paper as well. So
So in terms of the craft of writing, is there some aspect of it that you feel is your strong suit? Or is there something that you think you could do better at?
well, I can definitely mention what I can be better at. Because I still consider myself not even a novice, but more of an amateur. I haven't really done as much publishing or writing, so this is basically my first book. So basically getting the point across and getting and making my writing make sense to the reader. That's probably the hardest thing. It's because it can make sense to yourself in some way, but to readers, you need to also think about how they're going to think about it. not how you're going to perceive it. So when you do that, you'll write better and you'll get your point across a lot better. There's a lot of editing where I had to rewrite sentences where it sounds better this way because I think the reader's just going to understand it better this way, even though I understand it because I'm the one that wrote it and I'm saying it my way. It may not make sense to someone else. So I did have a lot of struggle with that. So I did have to really make it pop to say, how is this going to be avid to the readers? How's this gonna make sense?
Anything that you think you excel at?
Um, the examples, the symbolisms, I related to a lot of everyday things, so that creativity really gets the juices going and gets my brainstorming action going. So I'd say that's something I can maybe excel at.
Okay. Um, so once you completed the final draft of your memoir, how long after you completed it was it published?
So how long did the publishing process take?
Right after the book was ready to ready to get out there in the world, um, how long before it was published?
So it was about so after I was done writing and editing it, it
Mhm.
was probably about another month and a half till it was finally published.
Okay.
The publishing, I don't know if you're about that. You're gonna ask me another question,
Yeah,
but
that's the next one. What was your publishing journey?
so the whole publishing journey was about a month and a half, and uh, publishing is a lot, financially, especially. And since I'm an amateur writer here, I'm not a professional level at such. I needed to find a way to maybe do some self-publishing if there was a way. And I actually had a neighbor who self-published a book of hers through Amazon, and I did exactly the same thing. So I self-published it through Amazon. Basically, it's a step-by-step guided system where you upload all of your documentations, all your documents, you're writing out your Word documents that my book was on, your JPEGs, your images for your covers and back covers, pretty much everything. Was it hard? Yes, because you're basically just sending files, getting it uploaded, and you're praying that the format of the book is going to be what you visually want it to be, but it wasn't the case. I probably had to send so many different types of drafts, make so many edits. So it was a little hard because you're not physically putting the book together piece by piece yourself. You're kind of just sending it through a computer an automated software system where it's just putting it together for you in a matter of minutes, and which is great. But um, it can, you need to make sure the font is all there. You need to make sure everything is aligned. You need to make sure it's the right page number. The images come out correctly. Everything, there's no typos or anything. So um, that was probably the hardest part. And because of that, I had to make a bunch of edits to the book in addition, which is why the publishing took a little bit longer than expected.
Okay. And what do you think is one of the most surprising things that you learned in publishing the book?
How easy it was, and um, how accessible everything is in terms of you wanting to change it. You can change any type of any aspect of the book even after it was published. I mean, usually people don't because they want the finished product to be a finished product. They don't usually re-edit it after it's been published and such. But I know I have heard stories of people that have done that, and this gives you the option to do that. But in this case, I obviously did not do that. But I was very shocked at how easy it was. And the best part about it, the cost, which was nothing. Um, the cost of it really comes out of your royalties for your book, if anything. Not to get into much detail, but
Okay.
There's printing fees, there's publishing fees and such. So
Okay. Um, and before you uploaded it, before you got it, did you work with anybody? Did you work with like critique partners? Or did you have beta readers go over the draft, the manuscript before uploading it onto the Amazon platform?
absolutely. I had a couple of beta readers, mostly friends and family and very close friends and family, and I only chose them because they knew me the most. They knew me very well. They knew the story very well. So for them to read the book and get my sense on it would make them understand the story as opposed to someone that doesn't know who I am, that doesn't know what I went through. Um, I basically gave it to them. They gave me a lot of feedback, a lot of critique, saying, most of it was basically what I mentioned before in terms of a little bit one of my weaknesses in terms of getting the point across. They said, maybe try saying it this way or try elaborating it with this instead of this and such and so forth. So they were pretty much my beta readers. I thought at first about having maybe a focus group type do my reading. I was actually thinking about going into an outpatient program to have anyone that would voluntarily want to do it, kind of like a focus group reading the book because they might be going through the same thing. And it'd be good to get feedback from um, others that don't know you, but that are going through some kind of mental health crisis and such that can relate to some parts of the book at least.
Okay. So one of my last questions is, what advice would you give a new writer that's just starting out?
Um, Biggest advice I would give is to take your time. I know some people say, well, if I take my time, by the time it takes me one book, I could have written three or four books, but those three or four, but it's all about the quality, not quantity aspect of it. And I think taking your time and not rushing through it and knowing what you want to say and how you want to say it and how you want to see it visually on the page is more important as to how much should I even put in here and what should I even put in there. It's more about the writing aspect, about your writing, so that readers can understand you. Um, it's important to, I guess, take your time, not to rush through it. I did find that some of my writing I had to change a lot because I felt like I rushed through it. And because I rushed through it, it wasn't very clear in what I was saying. So I had to go back and make it clearer for the reader. And that did take a little bit of time. Um, Even if it was dealing with one paragraph, it could take a day, or one page, it could take a week. So I would suggest, advice wise, to take your time. It's not a race, but not take too much time on it, obviously, too. So that's the other thing. But
Okay. My final question is, if is there a topic that you always want to talk about, but that you never get a chance to, like for this interview? Is there one thing that you would like to talk about?
yes, it's something I've gone through myself personally. That's something I see a lot of out there, but it's something I thought about as a subtopic in maybe a follow-up book in terms of living my life with a mental illness. With mental health, there's a big stigma out there, and I've always wanted to write about the stigma and how people see it, and even give examples of scenarios or situations, almost like a what would you do type of scenario, because I see that all the time, and then things are not treated as such. They're not treated the right way. People don't know really what to do. There's miseducation out there in terms of mental health, or there's not enough education of it. Um, so it's something I've always wanted to dabble into. I've always been an advocate of it, and I have thought about maybe writing something, and this would be in a perspective of a patient, not so much as a psychiatric professional, because I'm not a psychiatric professional. Because most of these types of books where you're going to read subjects on this is from a psychiatric professional, where I kind of want to write it from the amateur, from the patient point of view.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, thank you so much, Jared, for being here today and for talking to us about your book. Best of luck with the book and any of your the ideas that you've mentioned today that you're thinking about for another book down the road. So again, thank you so much, and hope to see another book from you soon.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you so much.